We're talking to Tommy Kraft, our special guest for this production of Time to Talk. Welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thank you very much.
And of course, as always, helping me with this interview is O.C. Marler.
Thank you.
And it is a joy to have you on this Time to Talk conversation. I appreciate you taking time to talk to us. I need to just define you a little bit, if that's possible. I'm not sure anyone can define Tommy Kraft. But of course, you've been preaching since you were very young. 6-7 years on the evangelistic field, involved in pastoring churches, started over 5 churches. For the past 38 years, you have been the pastor of First Church in Jackson, Mississippi. And of course, most people would not only define you in that sense, but also define you as the longtime president of Jackson College of Ministries, where you became president there in, 1976 through about 1999?
Correct.
So I think you're well qualified to talk to us, and we're interested a little bit about your life. And it all started for you back someplace in Louisiana, and I always get amazed about
Anacoco.
Brother Marler and guys from Louisiana.
Anacoco. Did they ever get a light?
They did. They finally got one. It's on 171, right in the middle of town.
What was that you saying about Anacoco? Now, we're already talking about Anacoco like everyone knows where it's at.
I know. Everybody should know where it is. That's where I'm from.
What was you telling us about Anacoco?
Well,
lately. Didn't something happen just lately? You said it.
Yeah, hog run to the house and scraped his back. Is that what you're talking about? Not much happens in Anacoco.
I can't think of what it was, but you told me some important fact about it.
When Brother Marler gets with guys from Louisiana, it's always like this junky stuff that they start talking. I get totally lost. I mean, it's like...
You was on the Calcasieu side of the Calcasieu, or was you on the Calcasieu side?
I was on the Calcasieu side. Anacoco is a wonderful spot.
Yeah. Let's talk about those your early years in your ministry. I think if anyone writes the history, and people will no doubt write the history of the Pentecostal movement during the past 50, 60 years, I think Tommy Kraft is going to be one of the people that they're going to have to talk about, because you've had a tremendous impact on the movement in many different ways, which I hope we can get into in this conversation. But let's go back and start in those early days when you were a young evangelist.
West Texas.
West Texas. Where did it start? Is that where it started?
No, yeah, West Texas started, right?
You started preaching. How old?
Well, you almost, an embarrassing moment is when I preached my first sermon in Anacoco at a tent meeting that Brother Gamlin had. They asked me to bring a sermonette. I prayed all week long, got Psalms 34 and 8, and I thought if you use notes, you backslid. I found out if you didn't use them, you would backslide. And so I didn't use any notes, so I prayed all week long, and that was my first sermon. I was 14. And you
were serious about it?
Oh, I was dead serious. I'd prayed a whole week, fasted. I mean, done without, till my, couldn't eat.
Without turnip greens and the whole thing.
And so what happened was, Brother Gamlin had a tent meeting, and we had a youth service just before service started, every Sunday, before main service started, and it's under the tent meeting. Oh, there must have been a lot of folks there, probably 250,000.
At Anacoco?
At Anacoco. At least I thought it was when I looked at him.
It looked like it.
And when I got up to preach, this young man to preach before me, he had a guitar and he strummed it so good and sung a good song. And he did so great. And I had to follow him, and now we're ready for Brother Tomalin. Vernon Parish. When I hear a phone call that says, I'd like to speak to Tomalin, I know it come out of Vernon Parish.
Yeah.
Everybody knows me by that. Anyway, I got up to preach. I read my text, and everything went blank. So I read my text again. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. So I read my text again, and all I could hear was the grunting and groaning of all the saints. Say, oh, God, bless him, help him, Jesus, Lord, give him words to say, anoint him, Lord. And sure enough, about that time he anointed me because I thought of something.
Yeah.
I thought of something to say. And I said, it's like a man that drinks whiskey. If you'll take a little nip, you'll want a whole lot more. And I went back and fainted, and when I come to, they were actually fanning me just like this. I promised God I would never preach again, but...
Said you won't worry with me no more.
That's too funny.
Now, I remember what you told me about Anacoco. Didn't you say that they put it on the map?
Oh, they put it on the map first time a couple of years ago. Never been on a map.
Where is Anacoco really in terms of...
It's 8 miles north of Leesville, 10 miles above Fort Polk, 100 miles south of Shreveport, 15 miles east of Sabine River.
And your folks were agricultural people.
Mostly.
Yeah.
There were agriculture teachers plus politicians and plus school teachers.
Whatever it took.
Right.
That was your father, was not a preacher.
Not a preacher.
So you the first preacher in your family.
First preacher on the craft side.
Yeah.
On my mother's side, the Blackwell side, I'm the many preachers on that side.
Which we're going to have to talk a lot about her tonight. Or some about
my grandmother.
Your grandmother and your mother. Yeah, they were.
Three main people that made an impression on my life was my grandmother, Ma Blackwell. She traced her lineage. She was named Five Ash before she. Her father was found by pioneers, and they named him Enoch, which means drawn out. Mm-hmm. And they advertised for 2 years and couldn't find out what his name was. So kept him, and they named him Five Ash because it's an Indian name. Whatever the Indians see, mm-hmm. Babbling Brook, Running Spring, mm-hmm. Cloudy Sky, or Red Cloud, Crazy Horse, or whatever. So they named him Five Ash. So that's as far back we go on grandmother's side. Our family came out of South Carolina in the 1800s and migrated on to Louisiana. Anacoco, they established Anacoco just about.
They did, yeah. His grandmother, she was one of those ladies, a lady of faith, and preachers, all the preachers knew her. And
so your family preceded you, in a sense, in terms of the Pentecostal experience. So you came by your faith through your family.
Right.
Did you always know you were going to be a preacher, kind of? I hear people say that some knew when they were little children.
Just recently I was talking to a group of people. Honestly, I knew that I was going to do something when I was 3, 4, 5 years old. I didn't know what. Mm-hmm. But I basically went through high school and so forth, didn't go over Fool's Hill. I was too serious and real shy. I was so shy I couldn't dismiss in silent prayer. Yeah. Nobody believed that now, but that's really the truth.
It is hard to believe. Oh, how old were you when you went to West Texas to start that church?
I just graduated from Bible college, and I promised my grandmother I'd go out there and build a church.
What church was this in St. Francis?
No, West Texas.
West Texas.
Yeah. That's, what town?
A little town called Ira, Texas. Yeah. It's on the banks of the Pecos River. Yeah. I baptized all the converts in the Pecos River. A lot of them are still living today. That was 40-some-odd years ago. I just got out of Bible college, and I promised Ma I'd go out there and build a church. Yeah. So, got Halliburton Oil Company to give me the cement. I got an oil company to donate to me the pipe. I learned how to weld. I learned how to cut pipe. I made all the trusses myself, stacked all the block, poured all the concrete, and left there in 18 months and didn't know a dime on anything.
Wasn't that some of the richest oil country right there?
The intermediate Texas crude now is the benchmark for all oil. Mm-hmm. You could take it right out of the ground, put it in your crankcase. Largest oil well in the world, the deepest oil well in the world, the shallowest oil well in the world was there at one time. Wow. They were digging a slush pit.
Is it still producing in that area?
Correct.
Looking back on all that, do you have a mentor? You start preaching so young. Do you look back and say, well, this particular person mentored me, or what?
The person that mentored me the most in the ministry was my pastor. I had a series of pastors that didn't make that much impression. Yeah. But this man was Brother Hennigan. Brother James Hennigan, his son.
Is he still with us?
No, sir, he passed away a good many years ago.
His son is still with us.
His son.
Now, what city are we in, Brother Hennigan?
Anacoco.
Oh, in Anacoco.
Anacoco.
Okay.
He was raised there.
Yeah.
He took the church. And when I was about 12, 13, he took the church. And he taught me how to pray, how to fast, work in the altar, sincere. One of the most blessed men I've ever seen. Weighed about 260 pounds, 6'2", died at a young age. But he put his big, strong arms around me and never gave me a whole lot of approval, except he'd hug me and tell me I believe in you.
Yeah.
And
that stayed with you?
That stayed with me.
Yeah. He was a man's man.
He was a man's man. And surprising things that young people notice, and here's what I noticed. When we go to a fellowship meeting or a youth rally or a youth camp or camp meeting, he'd be the last one to leave the altar. And I'd feel condemned out at the drink stand because my pastor was in there praying folks through. So I learned how to stay with it through him, through his example. He never had preached had a series of situations happen in Anacoco wasn't quite desirable, and they said, let Brother Hennigan take it over. He can't do any harm.
But he fooled him.
He fooled him. And it took a little church running about 40, and by the time I left, we was running about 175.
Yeah.
And
now, did you
That's
go?
a big church in a country setting.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
We had a good many big churches there in Louisiana. Shady Grove, Camp 8. So.
You know, were you going to say something? I was going to make a comment. No, that's okay.
I was just going to ask him if he if you started evangelizing from West Texas thing. I
evangelized between the summers. I went 2 years to International Bible College in San Antonio, and that college went basically what we call now is, extreme charismatic type. It was latter rain then, so I was only there 2 years, but I evangelized each summer. I didn't have but 2 or 3 nights left in my summers, and the first summer, I got out, I preached 10 days at my home church, run out of something to preach, and had to close, and we had the biggest crowds you'd ever seen. They'd seen, and I had to close because I didn't have anything else to preach.
Was J.T. Pugh in that school when you were there?
No, J.T. Pugh was at Rising Star.
Oh, he did go
in
to
Texas.
that school, though.
No, sir.
He didn't. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, sir. He didn't go there. He was friends to the people, but he didn't go there.
I see.
I was going to ask when you were talking about all the Louisiana cities, because most of the time when I talk to people, well, Brother Marler, of course, is from Louisiana. You're from Louisiana, and different people. And there seems to have been this kind of Pentecostal culture in Louisiana. That's how I would describe it. I think that's true. I grew up in Indiana, so I'd say that's partially true here in Indiana, too. But it's not the same kind of Pentecostal culture as there was in Louisiana. Talk to me a little bit about that. What you grew up like I obviously OC did and others. You grew up in this kind of culture of Pentecostalism, and it bred a lot of great men. A lot of great men come out of that, and great preachers. And
possibly one reason for that is we never felt like they called us holy rollers and all the names that you call. Mm-hmm. But we never felt like we were second-class citizens anywhere because we had, from the days of the outpouring of the Holy Ghost, for instance, at Anacoco, old Brother V.A. Gidrose pastored there at one time.
Mm-hmm. So it's the biggest thing in town.
It's the third largest, third oldest church in the state. But when you have people like that, you have a security.
Yeah.
And
we felt sorry for other people that didn't have it.
Yeah. So it was pervasive. The numbers were pervasive. Large.
They were not only pervasive.
We were so proud of the fact that we were Pentecostal.
Yeah.
That bred confidence and that sort of thing.
Honestly, that's the truth.
Yeah.
I know I pastored Michigan, for an example, for 22 years. And religion in general, particularly evangelical churches, are disdained by politicians or looked down upon, certainly by the intellectual community, for the most part, fundamentalist. But you didn't have that. But if you work in that type of society, you get you're beat back a lot. Mm-hmm. But in Louisiana, preachers seem to have a different kind of confidence. Am I going down the wrong road?
No, you're on the right road. Right.
Okay, and they seem to have this kind of where the Pentecostal experience and culture was part of society itself. And you didn't feel this kind of intimidation in the same way I think.
25 square miles from where I live, there's 25 oneness churches.
Yeah.
And when you said Pentecost, you wasn't thinking Trinitarian, Assembly of God, or anything. You just everyone knew it was oneness, and even if they did not agree with you, they believed in you.
And that's the atmosphere we grew up in, and we felt like, and we grew up around great men that was great preachers, good speakers, orators, camp meetings, and so forth, that set the pace for religion in that area.
Yeah.
In fact, it's still pervasive. And there is a culture that is quite different,
yes,
which it made give young preachers growing up a lot of security.
Right. I guess that's the word I was looking for, as opposed to being in some kind of more secular, where you're being beat down all the time, and you're not really. There was a sense of acceptance, as you're saying, which probably helped to create a lot of positive
That's
thinking.
right.
They wouldn't think about having something at school on Wednesday night. That'd be out of the question, because people went to church.
And that was the culture we raised.
So your folks were Pentecostal. You had this kind of childhood training, so to speak, and we're going to move from that to your years in Jackson, Mississippi, which really represents the bulk of your ministry. 38 years as a pastor, and we want to talk to you a little bit. Take a little break here, and then come back and start talking about Jackson, Mississippi, how you got involved with Jackson College of Ministries and the Bible College, and that's really a fascinating journey. And I want to talk a little bit in our next segment about how I first personally got exposed to you and what that meant to me personally. We're talking to Tommy Kraft, and of course helping me is O.C. Marler, and we'll be right back for our next segment in just a moment.
As the journey begins, the destination is clear. But what bridge do we take to get there? And what happens along the way? Arriving with faith, the Word of God lights our path. Talents and skills are strengthened. Prayer becomes a lifestyle. The heartbeat of God is revealed, and we become a part of it, leaving empowered by His Spirit. Since 1949, the gospel has been our foundation and blueprint for the present and future of the first accredited Oneness Pentecostal College. What is the destination? Become what God has called us to be. The journey is far from over, but it must start somewhere. CLC.
We're talking to Tommy Kraft, and we want to get back in this conversation. Thank you again for allowing us to kind of pick your brain a little bit.
So happy to be here.
Let's jump to Jackson College of Ministries. We know that your ministry, of course, was very rich and full of lots of experiences before you ever got to Jackson College of Ministries. But let's kind of go there, and then we'll work back maybe a little bit. You became the president of Jackson College of Ministries.
That's right.
You were already the pastor of First Church in Jackson. How long had you been there?
I had been there since 62.
So
I took it at 76, 72, about 15 years,
so
something like that.
You had a revival almost instantly, and then when you...
That's true.
Yeah.
It was blessed.
I heard they were standing outside, but lined up.
For the last 3 or 4 years, that when we were in the church at 1505 Robinson, that Brother Gamlin started, and I took the church after he'd only built the building, 94-foot lot, 200 foot deep, so it was very small, but it seated about 350, 400. But in the summertime, we'd open the door, put them in the vestibule, and then put them out on the porch. And I had room enough to preach about the size of the top of this for the last 3 or 4 years. And we actually, you hear about turning folks away, but we did for 2 or 3 years before we could build. So it started out real good.
does that affect the church if you're wait too long? I mean, sometimes obviously you
have to,
but you look back. I guess I'm relating this personally because I look back at my years in Muskegon, and I know I waited too long to build. That still grieves me even after all these years. I didn't have any choice, but it still grieves me.
Yeah, there is a time, and in my opinion, you can wait too long. But that particular time, we timed it just right. They dedicated the building in 62. We were full by running over by 65, and we bought 7.5 and then 15 more acres, moved out, contracted to be built it in 14 years, moved in, and then that one was running over within about 3 or 4 years.
Now, Brother Gamlin you took over from Brother Gamlin.
Right, he was the founding pastor.
Now, Brother Gamlin was an old Pentecostal name, preached with Brother D.L. Welch.
Correct.
And everyone knew him. How was it following him?
It would seem like it'd be kind of difficult, but with the character of this man, it was easy. I had preached 9-week revival there on 710 South President, and a lot of the people that were there had prayed through in the meetings that I'd preached there before. But now here's was the good thing about that. Brother Gamlin was only 52, which is a young man.
When he retired?
No, sir, when he left Jackson.
When he left Jackson.
And he had full of energy and everything. He was going to preach revivals. He preached big tent revivals.
Yeah.
But when he asked us to come in January, finally it transpired in July the 29th was our first service. But he was there on Sunday morning, and had me to kneel down in front of the pulpit. He poured oil on me, laid hands on me, and said, "This is the next pastor." And I felt a specialness about it when he poured that oil. He didn't just anoint me with oil. He poured oil on me. And then he preached his last sermon on Sunday night. I came in, was first service on Wednesday night, so the church has never been without a pastor. All they know is just Brother Gamlin and myself. But he said that morning, he said, if this church goes up, it's you and him. If it goes down, it's you and him. But he was such a man of ethics, he said, don't contact me unless you contact the pastor.
Yeah.
Don't call me for anything. Weddings, funerals, or anything, unless you contact him first.
Yeah.
And you let him contact me. So there's been a great relationship. And he was supposed to be at our church dedication the other day, but he's 88 now, and he had heart problem. And I went down to visit him. He couldn't come. Yeah. But he is actually the founding pastor, and he stayed there about 10 years before I was there.
So did you feel it necessary to put your sleeves up?
Not really.
That's the way he did.
He's famous for that.
It would be so obvious that I'd be mimicking him.
We got way off, but that was good. But I wanted to talk to you about the college. So you'd already been there from, 62 to 75?
Correct.
75, 76. Right. So, you weren't the founder of Jackson College of Ministries.
That's correct.
So the college was at, Tupelo?
It was
a district college originally.
Actually, let me reveal for the first time. This was supposed to have been an organizational school.
Oh, really?
Absolutely supposed to be. And so
when they started it, the idea was
to make it
kind of a national
United
school.
Pentecostal Church Bible College.
Yeah.
Because there was others that had started,
right.
And so they couldn't play favorites. But what they did do was we had a district, Tennessee and Louisiana, Tennessee and Mississippi and Alabama.
Right.
They took it, and that was 55 years ago probably. So wow. It's been a long time. Pentecostal Bible Institute. And I used to fly up there with a private plane and teach every week, and used to drive up there when I didn't. So I was.
So how come that didn't materialize as a?
The church, the school went through.
The national school thing didn't materialize.
There was other schools that wanted to start at that time.
Yeah.
And they were on the verge of it. Time-wise, it was probably the first one. That was their intention.
Yeah.
You had people like Brother Reed, Brother Soper. You had other people that was in on that.
It would have been like giving one school kind of a little edge.
Right.
It?
Well,
it was
showing partiality.
ABI was beginning with Brother Norris, and that was absolutely had to be. And same thing as C.P. Williams in Tulsa.
So what year is all of this kind of formulating now, originally? The school originally kind of formulated under that banner at what?
About 1946, right after the merger.
So it was quite a long time. And then then Mississippi took it over when that didn't.
When the three states didn't work, they wanted Mississippi to take it. Mississippi took it. When I came to Jackson 38 years ago, I was on the district board for about 6 years, and they wanted to have a separate board from the district board, so all the school problems wouldn't be a district problem.
That's a smart thing.
And it was the right thing to do, so I couldn't serve on both, so I served on the board of directors.
Was that when they moved it to the campground?
And that's when they wanted to move it to the campground, try to build a Bible college on the campground. Well, it didn't work out.
Tough.
And it was in 74, recession hit. Our church had been going real good, and we bought the charter, $60,000, just the charter. Had an old grand piano there. They asked me, said, isn't this worth $10,000 or $15,000? I said, 10 or 15,000 pennies, maybe. So I didn't take it. But I took the charter, and we canceled the charter and just have a charter of Jackson College of Ministries.
So you did start a new college.
It did, actually. And we started, it was everything at that particular point. Brother Mooney, you probably know this, but at that point, everything was Bible college. So we started 5 disciplines. You get a degree in theology and missions and religious studies and music and Christian education. And so we actually give degrees that is recognized by the state of Mississippi. We have the same accreditation that Millsaps, Belhaven, Mississippi College, which is Presbyterian, Methodist, and Baptist College. So I don't know if any other college has that. Do you have accreditation by the state of Indiana?
No.
I don't know if any other college. So we're totally recognized.
I think Stockton may have some of that in California.
Yeah, with California.
I think so.
I'm not sure about that, but
well, that was a good plus for you.
Right. They came out and they said they had tried and worked with us. Said, "Do you want to be accredited by the state? You want to be recognized by the state?" Finally, they came out, about 7 or 8 of them. They said, "We've got to make a decision. It's been going on for a good many years." People like Brother Poe, Brother Bernard, people that knew how to work with them. And I finally told them, I said, "We're not going to dig another foot of ground. We're going to buy another book. We're not going to add another staff," because we had some with PhDs as well as masters. I said, "We're not going to add anything. You take us like we are. We want to be recognized and accredited, or you don't take us at all. I'm not going to put another dime in it." Well, that's where it comes to being in a place for a long time. It just so happened that the Attorney General was a good friend of mine, and he got with the board, and they wrote us and sent us a certificate and grandfathered us in because we existed and given degrees before they even had their approving agency.
Yeah. So that worked good for you.
Worked great.
Has it been worth? You know, a Bible college, obviously, as you and I both know, and Brother Marler certainly understands, having been here at Indiana Bible College so long, looking back, do you look back and say it was worth all the fight and the struggles? You mentioned a little bit, you spoke for us tonight in service and mentioned about raising money and the staffing problems and all the things. Do you look back fondly and say it was worth it?
It was worth everything.
Yeah.
It was worth everything.
It's a special kind of ministry.
It's a special kind of ministry, and you know, I know we're being interviewed here, but I wish the whole world could listen. There's no harder work than Bible school work. Mm-hmm. But there's no more rewarding work. Mm-hmm. I've pastored a church. I've built churches. I've evangelized. I've been overseas evangelists and preaching crusades, and thousands get the Holy Ghost and baptized. But the most rewarding work is when you have a class full of bright-eyed young men and women that want to be touched. Yeah. And so I spent all of my life savings and all that I could possibly get, and all my wife could
with
get,
no
and
regrets.
All my friends with no regrets.
Yeah.
Borrowed money when that interest was high.
Borrowed it when it was 18% interest.
Yeah. And let me just say to you personally, you impacted a lot of lives, hundreds of lives. And I know my own family's been impacted by Jackson College of Ministries. We appreciate all you've done through the years and everywhere around the world. It must be very satisfying, even on the general board of the United Pentecostal Church International. And I'm sure other oneness organizations, men and women that can say, you know, I was there.
Your uniqueness shows up in some of the preachers out there, too. What I want to talk about, ask you a question about that. How did you get so laid back? Somebody's got to worry. Why don't you? What's your deal?
Oh, so it's a funny thing you mention that, because just a couple of weeks ago, somebody in Louisiana, a preacher about 45 years old, was about to have a nervous breakdown. His friend told him, said, "I want you to go spend about 2 months with Tommy Kraft and learn how to pastor." I had an experience. I mentioned it in chapel this morning, and the president of the Bible College couldn't be here today, Brother Mooney, so I mentioned it in chapel. But
let me just interrupt you here. Have you been waiting this entire interview to mention that,
to run that on
right between you?
Absolutely not.
Chapel.
No,
I think he's gunning. I think he's gunning for it.
I think he's gunning for it.
The real deal is you're like God. You're everywhere at the same time. So you were in chapel this morning.
I hope my wife is listening.
Yeah.
But I missed chapel. I apologize.
No,
you feel better?
No problem. I was busy. I don't feel better because I really didn't expect you. I didn't go to many of my chapels.
No, it wasn't today anyway. It was yesterday.
It was yesterday.
It was yesterday, and I was fighting my way back from the Dominican Republic, where I was preaching to
right.
souls, trying to win people to the
That's
Lord.
right.
So
you
now
sure that was yesterday?
Again, you're like God.
Maybe that was Tuesday.
You're just everywhere. Dominican Republic, Great Britain.
Now that we've settled that issue.
Well, this jet lag is really...
Now that we've settled that issue.
But this morning I mentioned something to the student body, and the reason I do that is because, and I've mentioned it every couple of years, at Jackson College of Ministries.
That was yesterday, Brother Kraft.
No, I mentioned it every couple of years at Jackson College of Ministries.
Okay.
Because it relates to young people, but the quicker you can learn that and get self out of the way and get the flesh nailed to the cross and get beyond what people's going to think and your fame and your fortune and what's going to happen, the quicker the better. Yeah. I actually think theologically there's an experience that you can have at Calvary where there is where you do leave your ego and you check it there.
I believe that.
And it's. I know we die daily, but at the same time, you can have that one experience. That one experience was kind of a defining moment in my life. I was in West Texas building this church, and my father passed away. I came to Louisiana. We buried him. I got sick. I vomited a lot. I lost down about 110 or 15 pounds. They put me in the hospital, and I was by myself. My grandmother couldn't come. I could take Maul Blackwell and go to the middle of Brooklyn, New York, and build a church today. She's still living. She's that kind of person. But there's nobody there. I was staying with my aunt, and I got real sick. Got in the hospital, and I swelled up for some reason. Top of my head, bottom of the foot, unrecognizable. There was a contractor in the same room with me. He woke up that morning. He said, "Preacher said, you look like you're about dead." Because that's very encouraging when you think you're going to die. And I looked in the mirror, and I went to bed, pulled up the covers, and said, "Here I am, Lord." Doctor come by and checked me, and he said, "Come to my office." So he gave me 5 little red pills. I don't know what those red pills were. But there have been times when I'd like to sleep that I wish I had a calf from that old cow. Because
that means in Southern a bunch of pills.
I'm going to let that go.
Let that go. But that means, I didn't know what it was. But he said, go to sleep and take the pill.
Maybe it was placebos.
Probably was. But he said, when I went to his office, he said, if you don't get a hold of yourself, said they make institutions for people like you.
Wow.
I said, what?
Wake-up call.
He said, they make institutions for people like you. I said, you mean like, you used to call them insane asylums. He said, that's right. He said, take this and go to bed and go to sleep. But he said, go to bed and then take it. I said, nothing can affect you that bad. I took it and tried to take a bath and go to bed. And finally I crawled in bed. But that wasn't the problem. After a couple of nights, I was still totally worried, upset, fearful, afraid, church half built, going to have to leave, got sick, father passed away. But I could take you to the spot in this little town, Ira Ann. It's named after Ira and Ann Yates. Biggest oil find in the world at that time, Pecos County. And in fact, they was digging the slush pit. That's an interesting deal. And hid oil in Texas. And they put a pipe in the middle of it, dug a ditch, put a little dam around it, put a pipe in it, pumped it up to the highway, and the shallowest oil, and they pumped it there for years. They had a little postcard, shallowest oil field in the world. But when I went to the living room where I was staying, and there was an old green couch there. And for a couple of days, I wrestled and wrestled. And I mentioned the chapel this morning. This was a defining moment in my life where I gave it all over to God. Mm-hmm. Nothing seemed to be going right. And I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed. Revelation 3:20 came to my mind. It said, to him that overcometh will I grant to sit with me in my throne, even as I overcame and was set down by my Father at his throne. So for 2 days I wrestled with that verse of Scripture, and I'd grit my teeth and I would say, I'm going to overcome, I'm going to overcome. All I was wanting to overcome for was save my name. Out in West Texas, and nearest church was 100 miles away, and buzzards just come over every week checking on the dead. We didn't have any.
Not every week. They didn't come every week.
No, every other week. No airplane, no buses, no trains. There was nothing there. But I got a hold of God, Brother Mooney, and it's honestly a defining moment in my life. And in that moment, God said, son, you know how to overcome? I said, God, I am trying to overcome. He said, the way to overcome is just come on over. Well, I wrestled with that for a little while and understood. Yeah. So I gave him reputation, church built okay. And since that day, and I was about 23 or 22 and a half, and since that day, I've learned to do more with less effort, and I learned it at an early age. And so that's really the beginning of how it seemed like that I can either talk, whether you're preaching to 10 or 1,000 or 10,000.
I hope preachers will see this video and hear what he just said.
Yeah. That's really the way it works, too. You just have to trust God. If you can try too hard.
You can try too hard.
In his services down there, of course, you know, I'm sure, that the way he'll be sitting there and all of a sudden he'll start talking to somebody out in the congregation and make them talk back to him. And then he might be, all of a sudden, just leave the platform, go out and say, I didn't see you here. Is that your grandma saying that? Well, people love that.
They do. They love it. Well, that's what makes you special. We're going to take another little break here. That was a wonderful, I think, challenge to everybody, to all of us, just to trust and relax in Christ.
Sooner or later, you'll have to learn.
You have to. If you don't learn that,
you'll have burnout.
That's right. Maybe we'll even talk about that. But I want us to get to a time in your life when I personally became acquainted with you during what came to be called, I don't think this was your name, and you can explain it to us maybe, the Deeper Life meetings. And maybe we'll go to Korea and talk a little bit about the impact. Let's take a little break.
Thank you.
And we'll get back. We're talking, of course, to Tommy Kraft and O.C. Marler, and we'll be back to continue this conversation. We're going to talk about the Deeper Life meetings that made a tremendous impact on the Oneness Pentecostal movement, and these were under the direction of Reverend Tommy Kraft. We're continuing our conversation with Tommy Kraft from Jackson, Mississippi, and what a delightful and interesting person you are. Thank you for all you do for God's people. I want to talk to you now about Deeper Life because I can go back, my wife and I can go back and remember those very special meetings that you were part of that went all over the country, went to many districts, came to our district in Michigan at that time, and were basically preaching conferences, one preacher right after the other. Tell me about those meetings, how they got started, why they got started. They're part of a lot of people's, I think, positive memories. So tell me about those meetings.
Sometimes meetings like that are meant to be events and not to be continued. I suppose that must have been one of those kind of meetings. I mean,
there was a first meeting somewhere.
Right, and it was in Jackson.
Okay.
But in Jackson in 1973, a good friend of mine, Brother Kenneth Phillips, pastored in Austin. We'd preached around the world together.
He was a great, he still is a great preacher.
Literally, we had preached around. In fact, we preached in Honolulu, Philippines, Korea, visited Israel, came to Great Britain, come back to New York, came this way one time. One time we went the other way around.
Yeah. And that was before everyone was doing it.
Yeah, we literally went around the world twice, literally this way, preaching. So, but we had spent so much time together, praying, fasting, and seeking God, and not as much fasting as we should, but we were doing the right thing. And we decided we was going to have a meeting. We were so, at that point, naive. Well, naive in the meaning that we didn't get permission from the district, we didn't get permission from the national organization, we didn't get permission from anybody. And might have been a dangerous move to make now, I'm not sure. But
you was grown, though. You had your own church.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in pretty good sense.
Yeah.
We
that's
prayed.
been contested, Brother.
It probably has, but I think it's been proven.
Okay.
That my IQ is at least 100.
Pretty good sense.
And but we prayed, and we felt like and Kenneth, even to this day, since he started all over again. But sometimes you can't start things over again. But we got together and said, we're just going to have a meeting. There was no advertisement, only by word of mouth. And in 1973, we had this meeting, and there was about 250 preachers that showed up. I'm sure that with their wives and so forth. It was not a saints meeting as such, but the first meeting we preached. There was great preachers that preached. You had Brother Hanby, you had Brother Phillips, you had Brother Mangan, you had Brother Dees, you had Brother I can't think of all the ones that we had there preaching at that particular time. But nobody was anxious to preach. Mm-hmm. We were anxious to seek God. Nobody was anxious to be the next preacher, and nobody knew who the next one was going to be until I told them. Well, I felt like this was the right one. And so it worked. It worked that way. And the crowds, it was great. We were preaching sometime at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. It wouldn't be but maybe 200 in the auditorium, but it was preaching and praying. It had such an impact. In fact, I was going to kind of want it to pattern it after the Keswick meetings in England. But it got to be it just got all out of our hand. The next year, we just announced that year we was going to have another one with no advertisement. Nobody sent out anything saying, but it got known as a Deeper Life Conference.
Mm-hmm. Because you didn't really name it that.
I didn't name it that, no, sir, and we didn't officially put that. But
I think Brother Pugh had a little to do with that.
Brother Pugh, at that time, the Home Missions Department.
It was a good name. It actually was a good name.
It was a great name.
They really were deeper.
Because they were trying to go deeper
and
in
and
the
it
Word
worked.
and also in the Spirit.
It worked. It really worked. But I didn't know what would happen at that time. So the next year we had one. The amazing thing is, still no advertising. Mm-hmm. And word of mouth got out, and but we did put out, people to sign.
Yeah.
Pastors, it was our preachers that was there.
To register.
We had over 900 preachers, no charge, of course, 900 preachers that registered.
Wow.
And so we couldn't get them in the house. And night and day we had church preaching, praying all night long, all day long.
So now did districts start inviting those meetings
what
to
happened
their districts?
Immediately after that was over. In fact, according to Brother Tenney and people like that, was at headquarters they shut out the lights at St. Louis, and everybody came but somebody to answer the phone. Brother Chambers was there, Brother Pugh was there, whoever the people were that at headquarters, they came, and they were just part of it. Greatly enjoyed it. It was a good meeting. I don't know if they thought it was going to have a pull-off meeting or not. But
I've heard people say that those meetings, that they feel that some of those meetings really inspired revival over the past 25 years or so.
But
there were critics of that meetings, were there not?
Yes, sir. Yes.
How did you feel about people that questioned your motive about those meetings?
I personally didn't take any issue with it at all. I knew my motive. I know my motive was clean and pure, and I didn't question it.
You see, it wasn't long until these meetings started going all over the country, and it wasn't just you preachers preaching it, preachers
Correct.
from everywhere. I participated in several of them, and several people got involved.
Yeah.
And then some of the criticism, that's when it started kind of.
That's correct. But we went, Brother Pugh said, well, let's make this a part of the home missions effort. And from that came the old evangelism council. Mm-hmm. And they would just sit down a tape recorder and said, tape it, said, give us some ideas.
Yeah.
It was refreshing.
I think those meetings
refreshing.
gave birth, probably one could argue, that they gave birth to some of the meetings that we have today, like our own Mid-America Revival Conference here in Indianapolis, and because of the times, perhaps. Most of those people say that that's true.
Yeah. But the good idea is it's already gone everywhere.
Yeah.
Pentecost happened one time, but it went everywhere.
Of course.
Jesus was born in Bethlehem, just happened one time.
Would you agree that you couldn't make a program out of this?
You could not make a program.
It was something that was kind of spontaneous.
After it became a program.
When you try to make a program out of it, it dies.
Right.
Yeah.
Guys, I say guys, preachers try to do that. Sometimes I think it ruins it.
Yeah.
And that was the first, for me personally. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say, I'm glad to hear that, because I hear this all the time. But I'm glad to hear it from you, because, you're absolutely, you're credible, and you've got a great work going and done a great work. But I hear this almost every week from somewhere around the country. And I could name people that are pastoring some of the biggest churches, say they got their start in those 73 and 74 meetings there because it was totally non-structured.
Challenged.
It was, and challenged, but it was non-structured in the sense that, well, somebody's going to preach now and somebody's going to preach now.
And they had a sense of genuineness to it.
And it was pure genuine. Everybody was hungry for God. It was so hungry until, I mean, crying and praying in the prayer rooms and the fellowship hall and the auditorium.
But what's interesting, Brother Kraft, is some people were afraid of that. Some people were afraid of that. They were afraid that was going to get wildfire, and all that kind of thing.
Not only they were afraid it was going to get wildfire, but I had some officials that thought they were coming down because they thought maybe we were going to pull off and split an organization. Of all the things in the world that I don't want to do is to split nothing.
But getting away from your 2 or 3 meetings there that started it.
That's correct.
There was some actual negative things involved.
That's correct. Absolutely.
There were some preachers that preached and began to belittle anyone that didn't do it just the way they did it.
Yeah. And that's true.
And there were some people that were going too far out in a false spiritual realm.
Exactly right. But that happens in any kind of move of God.
Yes.
From Azusa Street on. You have excesses.
That's a good point, and it's right that you bring that up because that did happen.
That did happen.
So some of the criticism was justified, is what you're saying.
Right.
Because
later on,
not in the beginning.
That's right, not in the beginning.
And that was justified, and I can understand it. But what happened, they did want us, and I went, I preached around camp meetings and so forth, but this had a little different aura about it, they thought. So I preached everywhere from Pennsylvania, Michigan, California, Texas, I can't name all places, Illinois, different places. But that was birthed there, and it was birthed out of sincerity, and there's been seemed like a whole lot of good that's happened from it. But I take no credit for it, and I say this sincerely, for the record, because that was a genuine move of God that only God orchestrated and got it started. But from that, look at the people that have begun. It didn't create anarchy.
No.
It gave everybody a latitude and said, okay, we can do it. We can build churches. Anyway, it's just a great
First time I heard you preach, hold your thought, I was just going to mention, first time I heard you preach, I think was at those meetings. I could be wrong about that. But I think I was struck by you already were kind of in this laid-back mode, but you preach so extemporaneously.
Yes.
Did you come to that, or did you, I don't know, did you develop that or come to that, or did you always preach that way? Or was there a point where you said, I need to develop this particular style? I'm not talking now so much about it, just kind of in terms of methodology.
I've basically been that way most of the time.
Most of the time.
Most
so you
of the
kind
time.
of started
in the
out
beginning, you have to have something to kind of go by.
Yeah.
And still now you use a few things. Sure. But extemporaneously.
Now going back to your pastor, just to interrupt him, did he preach that way?
Brother Hennigan.
Brother Hennigan.
Not really.
Not really.
Not really. He preached more what you would call, of course he probably didn't know what to call it even at that time, expositorily.
Yeah.
He'd read a scripture and talk about it.
Yeah.
He'd read a scripture and talk about it.
Yeah.
Read a scripture and talk about it. And, I mean, that's the way he did.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get that from there. It's expository type preaching, extemporaneous and textual preaching.
Yeah.
You've covered all that, I'm sure, in your classes. But you take a text and develop it from there. But by no means am I the best preacher and don't even claim to be, but the best preachers are those that are extemporaneous.
Kind of fill them.
You
they
can
fill
ask
their
any
brains
public
with
speaker,
stuff.
whatever it is. You saturate yourself in the subject and you speak extemporaneous.
Then, go for it. You were holding
those meetings were they were run in such a spiritual and loose manner. Like I was in one in St. Louis, and the man got up to preach, and he prayed, and he said, I don't feel like preaching. And another preacher said, I will. And he got up and preached like a house on fire.
Yeah.
This man preached later and did super.
Yeah.
That's the way it was done in the early days of Pentecost at the turn of the century. Exactly the way it was done. Yeah. Frank Bartleman in his book, Azusa Street, that's exactly what he'll tell you the way it was.
Yeah. And a sensitivity to
sensitivity.
the Spirit.
And it was, if there's, in my lifetime, that was the nearest we've come to it for those kind of meetings at that time. It was so sincere, so good. I don't see how
when you're talking right now about that, I didn't mean to interrupt, but does that reflect your philosophy, would you think, on
yes,
in ministry?
Yes, sir. That's my philosophy.
You've got to have that. With the Spirit, we can accomplish things.
Right, exactly.
It's not going to be about intellect and education and money. It's going to be about the degree to which we follow the leadership.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. Of course, obviously I believe in education. You wouldn't be involved in Bible school.
Of course.
And training,
but you can,
involved in
but you don't have an absolute dependency on that.
Definitely.
That's a different thing.
That's correct. Can't do it.
Brother Kraft, what preacher do you like to hear speak the best? Just you drive the furthest to hear.
Drive the furthest to hear. You mean currently?
Well, no, you can go back and then tell us current. And you can tell us.
The one that I like to hear the most, actually, and hear preach most, was Elder Brother V.A. Gidros.
Yeah.
I'd be in preaching in driving distance, and he'd have those sectional conferences. I'd drive just to hear him preach.
Yeah.
He was very creative, was he not?
Creative at that time. That type of preaching, he would preach kind of like I do now, and that was like, not that I knew how he did it then, but he built a sermon on his feet. And you could tell it was building it. I'm sure he'd practiced it going down the highway, and not practiced it, but got the thoughts
formed
and so
it
forth.
in his mind.
But that is, you leave room for the Spirit to operate when it's extemporaneous. Of course, I've noticed being around you, Brother Mooney, that that's pretty well the way you do too.
Yeah. I don't know, it's pretty scary.
But it always comes out right.
It works out right.
But the thing about preaching is, I think I was talking about this the other day in a class, sometimes it's hard to really define exactly what you do.
Exactly.
Like somebody says, "What do you do?" And he's like, "I'm not sure exactly what I do."
That's
so
true.
that I'm certainly extemporaneous in that sense.
Definitely extemporaneous.
But extemporaneous doesn't mean that you're not prepared.
That's correct.
Because you're filled up. Well, you got to be filled up with something.
With your subject.
And with your subject, and you know where you're going.
I'm going to ask you a question that is hard to answer, I'm sure. But is there one meeting? The meeting, probably you could say, well, that's probably the greatest meeting I've ever been in.
It's not an indictment to the American people, but the greatest meeting that I was ever in was a particular few meetings in Korea.
I see.
They invited me to come to Korea. In that particular meeting, where they pray and repent for 3 days, and the power of God fell that morning. We could actually, you've heard about it, and a lot of people still use it, actually see a cloud cover the people.
What years were you there?
1,000 got the Holy Ghost that morning.
In Korea.
That's
what years were those revivals taking place in Korea? You had a big part in those Pentecostal meetings early on. How many? You made many, many trips.
I made 7 trips to Korea.
So about what years were those? Did they start?
Let me see. That was in the years of, I want to say 76, 77, somewhere along in there.
So you're a very busy person this time in your life. You're starting Jackson College of Ministries.
Correct.
Now, that's where we first started hearing of Cho.
That's right.
Did you know him personally?
I did. I met him once.
Yeah.
I knew him. Also, I'd driven by with Brother Bernard, saw the place where he had service, and he was running about 1,500 back then.
Wow.
And but we had, in fact, talking about one of the most different experiences. Let me just tell you this. I'd already known back in 1951 that I would be a missionary to Korea. At least I thought, and that's when the war was going on.
Yeah, Korean War.
Korean War, and that's when it was. I prayed and thought that that's where I'd be. Well, as the years went by, I went to Bible school, took JCM. They asked me to go to Korea. Well, Brother and Sister Bernard were there and done such a fantastic work because they were. But they asked us to come, asked me to come, so I came. And the first meeting there, the man that's called the Billy Graham of Korea got baptized in Jesus' name, received the Holy Ghost. First morning we went there, I went and preached in his church and went to a prayer camp up in the mountains, and that's That's now everybody knows where prayer camps are in the mountains in Korea. Presbyterians, Methodists, Pentecostals have this. But so I was there to preach the doctrine. I was there. They knew I was going to preach the doctrine. They knew that's what I come for. And so the place was packed. But the first morning, that morning that I told about, I mean, literally you could see a cloud hover over those people. And 1,000 that we know of received the Holy Ghost then. But one of the things it was, they wanted me to come back and preach doctrine. I mean, you don't get to ask that much.
Is that Paka?
His name was Pak.
Pak.
P-A-K. It's kind of like Smith or something in here. But he was a powerful person. And I'm sure if Brother Bernard was here, he would attest to that. If we had a basket big enough to hold that revival, what Cho has done there now, we could have done then.
Yeah.
But it seemed like it was lacking in laborers in the harvest. But the reason I went when they called is because I had an experience that was so unique. I've never heard anything like this before, and I hope it doesn't embarrass you. That is this. About a year before they called me and asked me to go, I had a dream. Woke up and told my wife what it was about, and I had dreamed that I was pregnant. I dreamed that I was pregnant, and it was about time for the baby to be born. And I went to the hospital, and it was time for the baby to be born. I had my feet in the stirrups, and the doctors are all busy, and I could see them around, and the baby was born. I reached down and picked up the little baby, and nobody was there. I reached over and got the scissors and cut the umbilical cord and looked at him, and he was a little brown baby. And I didn't know exactly what that meant. But I knew that must be a birth of something, our church or something. So I went to Korea, and then from that one trip, I knew that was the birth of something that the Bernards had already impregnated all of Korea with. And it was ready for that to be born, and it was born there.
That's interesting how that dream would impact you to the degree that gave you courage.
Total influence, total confidence that was going to take place. I had absolutely no doubt of what wasn't going to shake a whole country. And it happened.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I want to talk to you a little bit about books and things that have influenced you in other maybe areas of your life. We'll take another little short break, and then we'll come right back and kind of wrap up this talk with...
That's what I like to talk about.
Yeah, books. Let's do that with Tommy Kraft, and we'll be right back to finish our conversation with Tommy Kraft from Jackson, Mississippi. I want to talk to you a little bit about books. I know, like most preachers, your library and books are part of your life. So let's talk a little bit about books and books that have influenced you and that sort of thing. I know Brother Marler and I have a real love for books. We like to take students up to Grand Rapids and the bookstores and all that kind of stuff. And
we came in at a time, you remember, when we used to run to the Baptist bookstore and run here and there?
That's true.
Everyone was buying books. Remember Chappell, McCartan, and those guys was all trying to get there to get one the quickest.
That's right, exactly.
Well, what's your favorite author?
My favorite author goes back a long time. His name is Glenn Clark.
Yeah.
He's impacted my life with his writings at an early age, which you hear a lot of things that he talked about way back then, now. But then it was kind of cutting edge. And so I was drawn to his writings. Any of his books are good.
It would still be cutting edge because most preachers didn't read them.
Yeah, that's probably right.
And
I'm not even sure they're in print.
They had them. I'm thinking of Sincere Desire of the Soul.
Soul's Sincere Desire.
Yeah,
Soul's Sincere Desire.
Soul's Sincere Desire. That's a great book.
The other one that he wrote is called Man's Reach.
Yes.
And the other one's called God's Reach. I can't think of any other right off, but he wrote a lot of books.
Yes.
Another person that impacted me at a time in my life when I was about 18 or 20, 22, and I've passed them on. They're called the John Lawrence Frost Library. If you can find those, I want them. Written by a man by the name of Harry Rimmer. No, I've had them all, and they're so good I give them away because it's the theory of evolution, the facts of science. He writes it on a layman's language that makes you know, beyond any shadow of a doubt, from the tiniest bacteria in the water to the biggest elephant in the forest, that there cannot be any crossing of the species. Therefore, it could not be evolution. But he says it in the layman's language, which gave me a great confidence. I already knew there wasn't evolution, but he put it in words that I could understand. His name's Harry Rimmer. I'd love to have, and this whole set of books are called the John Lawrence Frost Library. If you can find them all, I'll give you whatever you want to pay for them.
Well, I hope I can find them.
I'll buy them.
I'm going to look for them.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you what I was saying a while ago is just so many people read.
Yeah.
And a lot of people bought books, I noticed, but
they didn't read them. That's right. It's just like a man buying a hammer and won't use it.
Right.
Yeah, I'll get monkey wrench and never touch a machinery.
Yeah, one young preacher told me, he said, I don't want to read. I said, well, just better get out of the ministry.
Yeah, and I've heard them say they didn't want to read anything but the Bible.
Yeah.
Well, I sure want to read the Bible.
Sure.
But there are other things that I think it's important to know. In fact, current events is very important.
It is.
Yes.
Secular, reading books that have about the secular world.
Most people, some preachers, young preachers, ask me, what do I order? I got U.S. News and World Report. In 1952, I get it every Monday, every now.
Yeah.
I get the New York Times weekend edition. It takes me about Wednesday to read it. So you got the conservative side and the liberal side.
That's
the New
right.
York Times Magazine on the weekend gives you in-depth feature articles. So you have a little worldview of everything. U.S. News World Report gives you. It's like we're kind of question and answer thing.
Absolutely.
How many books do you suppose you read a month or a year? Or?
I'll read. All books I read are good. Some are a little lighthearted than others, but I'll read.
Forget Lewis Lamore. We're talking about
Lewis Marler. Louis Marler. What I read? I'll read an average about a book every week.
Mm-hmm.
That is an average book every 10 weeks, 10 days.
Yeah.
Make friends with books.
Yes.
Make friends.
You
with
mentioned
books.
Brother Gidrose about how he impacted you in terms of his preaching, and you enjoyed hearing him preach. In your own preaching, what's your signature sermon?
Yeah.
Is there? I mean,
there is.
What I mean is a sermon that people say, "Oh yeah, Brother Kraft preaches this sermon. I liked hearing him preach."
I've been requested to preach on faith a lot, and just plain have faith in God.
Yeah.
Of course, but that's and also one of the messages that I've been requested to preach, and I preach often is the 7 wonders of the wonderful God. You use the 7 wonders of the world, pyramids of Egypt, Hanging Gardens of Babylon, all those, and you take the 7 wonders of Christ: His birth, His life, His death, resurrection, ascension at Pentecost. Ascension, return at Pentecost, and the rapture. You've got 7. That's the 7 wonders of Christ. And so I've been requested to preach that more than any one sermon I ever preached. I ought to preach it here tonight.
No,
you couldn't have done any better.
That was good tonight. I'm going to correct you. But I want you to go back and get that one sermon that you did about the book of Acts. Or maybe if you just send me the notes and never preach it again, then I'll preach it for you. I will not give you credit for it. I want to say that right up front.
I don't have any notes.
We got to find that. I'm going to find that.
I do not have notes on it.
He did a sermon back in ancient history,
right,
about the book of Acts, and he took each part of the book of Acts, and here is the church in administration, a church in birth, or whatever it was. Each chapter you named. I mean, I can't recall all the names you put
I didn't name them after Schofield or somebody.
No,
I just named them.
It was good.
And
if God gave it to you once, He can give it to you again. We need it.
I'll have to pray about it. Maybe Brother Mooney can give it to me.
I'm going to try to find it. I probably got it somewhere.
What advice would you give, capsule advice for young preachers to get started, will help them get started?
A young preacher, it helps him most if he can find a mentor that he can allow himself to be mentored by. That, of course, is not always easy to do because, it's just difficult to do. And I'm not saying this to be patronizing or anything towards Bible colleges. I say it's because it's for real truth. For me, when I got 18, I didn't know what to do, how to do. I just knew I needed to do. And Bible school was my salvation when it came to preaching.
Right.
I not only rubbed shoulders with other people, I got exposed to a lot of preachers. It was the launching. It got me out of what I needed to be.
It changed your thinking.
That training is absolutely essential. And also, to help young preachers get started, I raised my first crop of preachers after church, sitting around the altar. And ask questions like this back and forth, just bantering with them, just being with them. Basically, just being with them. I think that's what happened to Jesus. I don't believe he set the disciples down on a log and said, now let's turn to the book of Amos and let's study it.
Yeah.
I think he
rabbinical style, they just, wherever he went, they went.
That's it. And he just learned by being there. The Bible said, let this mind be in you, which was in Christ Jesus. The Bible said they took note that they'd been with Christ. The only reason was because of their mind. I mean, it was no difference in their vernacular, but it was that they took on the mind of Christ because they were around him. So they talked the language he talked, not because it was Aramaic only, but because. So I've often said our brain is our hardware, our mind is a software, and garbage in, garbage out. You learn. If you put garbage in, that's what you're going to get out. So that's the mind. So if we're around Christ and good people, good preachers, and those that love God, you'll take on that their good aspects, hopefully.
Now, your church is on, your new church. What's that, 55 South? 55
South.
Now, I'd like for you to tell us how many square feet is in that building. I got lost in there.
The reason you got lost is because it's all under one roof. Really.
We might mention, before you get into that those listening to this interview, Brother Kraft just completed a brand new multi-million-dollar project.
That's right.
And
I'm
how
afraid
big
to
is
figure up how much it costs.
Well, don't do that. So we want you to stay with us. If you start thinking about that, we'll lose you.
You may not be as relaxed as you have been.
Yeah, I think I would.
You're trusting Jesus.
But we have 90,000 square feet.
90,000.
90,000 square feet. Auditorium seats about 2,000. You can put more than that in it, but at 1,900 to be comfortable.
That is a beautiful church.
But when we moved from the church, we have 4 churches, 4 buildings we've occupied the 45 years that Brother Gamblin's been there, and the church has been in existence. 710 South President, little small Presbyterian church that we rented. 1505 Robinson, crowded it out. 3425 Robinson, crowded it out. And it was 27,000 square feet, so we built 90,000 square feet. So it's 3 times larger than what we had, but we had to build a whole plant we couldn't add to, and got 30 acres on Highway 55, the main artery south to north.
Now, he has a way with the leaders of the city, and which I think that our young preachers need to kind of cultivate that sort of a thing, what does the Bible say, making friends with mammon, that sort of thing. And tell us a little bit, I remember hearing something about when you had the land and you had difficulty and you got help that way from...
That didn't start, you didn't get that overnight. I've just become friends with people in the city, which I think everybody should. The people that you invite to church and be friends with, they may not come themselves, but they'll spread the good news that somebody else will.
That's right.
And so from the federal judges to the governors, I've been personally acquainted. In fact, we baptized one of the governors, Governor Finch. We baptized him and prayed him through, and he talked in tongues like a Chinaman around our altar. So I don't think he lived it quite like he should, but at least we got him baptized. And he did pray through, and he'd come regular to our church. But we have made friends with all of these officials. When we started to build our new church, for instance, like the Department of Transportation on the Federal Highway, I went out there and very naively just had the bulldozer cut it down. Other people down the street, they were having problems because they cut some few bushes down. They charged them $8,000 because they cut some few bushes down on the federal right-of-way. I was there with bulldozers and scraped the whole hill down. And they come out and said, don't you know you're not supposed to do that? And I said, well, no, not really. This hill's in my way here. I want to, so they'll see the church a little better. Mm-hmm. I said, well, don't you know that I was supposed to get permission from the Department of Transportation? It just so happened that I knew the people. I let the word reach up. They come out and gave me a permit, already done. Same way with the natural gas. They said, we can't put you natural gas. You bought 30 acres kind of on a no man's land. It comes up to here and comes up to here, take a mile. Mm. And it costs a couple of $100,000 to put that gas from here to here. You got to go butane. I said, can't go butane. I want natural gas. Of course, the Senator Cochran's a personal friend. The Public Service Commissioner's a personal friend. And I just let it kind of drift on up. A couple of weeks later, they had already come through and bored under 2 frontage roads and a federal highway with getting all the permits themselves, and said, where do you like this stubbed out at?
Yeah.
Of course, just reached up the chain of command, and I've found most people like this will do what they can do.
To help
they
you,
won't
really.
do what they... But if you make them mad, they will stop progress.
They use power against you.
Exactly.
But now, I was privileged to be at his dedication. And on the platform, he had the mayor, the attorney general,
and the lieutenant governor. The lady.
And then you had who was the...
had appeals court judge, federal judge, Henry Wingate, you remember, asked him to come up.
Right.
And
he made the statement. He's black.
Right.
He said, Brother Kraft, what I like about Brother Kraft, said he realizes that you have to have the white and the black keys to play the Star Spangled Banner.
That's right.
And what he was doing was complimenting the race relationship.
We should mention that here you are in the Deep South in Jackson, Mississippi, which has had its terrible moments in terms of racial problems, and yet recently the city appointed you as the co-chairman of the Racial Reconciliation Committee, and congratulations to you on that, by the way. And that speaks well of your work in the community, your attitude toward that whole problem, and you've been a leader in that part of the world going clear back to the Civil Rights days, and I compliment you for that.
Thank you.
And you did that at a time when that was not popular for white preachers necessarily to join hands with the civil rights people, and you did that, and now it has commanded you the position of leadership both with blacks and whites.
Somehow that God's given us respect and honor amongst the blacks and the whites.
Yeah, and you have you have a mixed congregation in Jackson, Mississippi.
Sunday school teachers, ushers.
In fact, were you housed in the same building for a while?
Yeah, here's an interesting thing. What happened, the city officials paid all these people to come in and determine what could be done for Jackson to help it the most. So they wrote and put stuff on the wall, and you voted by color: green, blue, red, yellow, orange. And then there was to be 100 things how to improve Jackson. And out of that, they took the top 10, and they're still working on it. And they said, we want you to be co-chair, the mayor and the people that was in charge, and the former governor, Lieutenant Governor Winter, and I've been good friends, and want you to be co-chair the Racial Reconciliation Committee, which is the top thing out of the 100 things needs to improve in Jackson. By the way, while I'm on it, Mississippi is now the safest place for blacks of all the 50 states. So it's a good thing to know. I'm here to talk about the good things down south that takes place there. Now,
that's the truth.
One of the things that happened there, though, when we sold our church, we bought, we shared the building with a predominantly black church. It was a missionary Baptist church. They asked me to preach a revival for them. I preached 4 nights. The last night I was preaching. When I got through, my wife gave a message in tongues and interpretation. 75 got the Holy Ghost. I said, you can't hold my hands here because this is a pulpit I've been preaching in for 26 years. I may forget. They said, we want you to forget. And of course, I've been raised around there, and they think I'm some kind of an icon for whatever that means. And I said, they said the greatest meetings they were ever in. Our choir sung for them, we sung for them, but it was in our own church. But here's the interesting thing. CNN came down, brought their cameras, kind of like we're doing today, and gave an interview. And because we have not only two religions worshiping on the same roof, we've got 2 races in the heart of the Bible Belt, where I-20 and I-55 crosses. 200 miles in New Orleans, Memphis, and Dallas, and Atlanta.
That's your old church.
And so our old church. So they said, after they got through, they said, tell us some bad things that happened. I said, like what? Well, did you have any fights, shooting, scrapes? I said, no. Did y'all get along? Yeah. They said, well, we can't just publish good news. We've got to publish some bad news.
Yeah.
This is a fact. I said, well, go talk to the other pastor, Pastor McNeil. And they went and talked to him. They said, well, and at that time it's about a year, said, we've got along great. Their board, our board, we've all worked fine. We paid our notes on time. We rented back from them for $7,000 a month. And so they wouldn't do a documentary.
No.
Right in the heart of the South.
They couldn't
wouldn't
cause
do
problems.
Anything. And they don't want to cause any problems. And I'm sorry.
No, they couldn't cause problems, so they wouldn't.
But the deal is they won't just tell good news.
Right.
Yeah.
But But
If
they
they
didn't,
can't stir up
do
some
a thing.
hate.
But you know what,
and they sent the whole crew out there to have it done.
I think I hear you saying all these things and think about the churches that you built, the colleges that you have, or Jackson College, the influence you've had there, the influence you've had on the movement through your evangelism in Korea. That whole thing speaks of leadership, and we thank you for that. I wish we could go on and on and on here with all the wonderful things that you've done. And
a lot of that you've said tonight is going to help a lot of people, I believe.
Yeah, I think so too, and we appreciate that very much. And so we thank you for taking time to talk to us. And tell us a little bit about this wonderful lady, though, that's really done all the work that you're taking credit for tonight.
Yeah, the boss.
When she got sick,
he looks at
somebody
me real
asked
funny.
People asked me, said, "How are you going to make it?" I said, "I'm not only lost my right arm, I lost my right and left arm."
Yeah.
And she has lymphoma, and it's metastasized into her bones. So she is and as Brother Marler could attest to it, she is the one that stays and keeps the strength.
And she's been a tremendous partner with you all these many years.
Unbelievable.
You can't come to your church without feeling and sensing her influence.
Absolutely.
You know, she started off in her home church.
Exactly.
So strong.
Yeah.
She was organist.
And she played the piano at 12 years old when Brother and Sister Mangan was there. We was there at their 50th anniversary just recently. They had Mary to sing, and Brother and Sister Mangan was there, and I was there. Mary was feeling bad. But I told them when I was there, I said, of course, they're all, proud of her and what's taking place. But at that particular time, they didn't want to lose her. I mean, Brother Marler, he can attest the fact that even though as a young person, she was one of the major forces there in the church. Prayer and fasting, always faithful. And I almost had to marry Brother and Sister Mangan and the whole church together. And I told them, I said, I didn't want them, I wanted her. Yeah. And so it's been a great relationship.
We're going to run out of time here, and I want to thank you again for being with us. And we have been talking, of course, to Tommy Kraft from Jackson, Mississippi. We've been learning a great deal about his life, his ministry, his philosophy, his thinking on different subjects. We didn't get enough time to talk about some of the things you've been through, and there's a lot more to your story.
He's so unique.
Very much.
Very unique.
But Brother Kraft has given us tremendous insights, and we thank you very, very much for talking to us and being part of this particular interview. And maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Maybe we will. I want to thank you for being here. I'm thanking you for your ministry as well, Brother Marler's ministry. Particularly the last few 2-3 years, he's been so close because Mary has been sick.
Yes.
And he came down at the dedication the other day. He said, I'm here because I'm a friend of the bride.
Well, that's the way he is too, We've been talking to Tommy Kraft, and it has been a wonderful experience. And I hope the Lord will continue to bless you. And
thank you.
You
Thank
still
you
have
very
some
much.
great, great years ahead.
That's it.
Well, let's go embarrassing.
Yeah. The most embarrassing moment was the 6 weeks that I kind of lost out with God one time.
You don't want to say you backslid, right?
No. I got a little cold in my soul.
Yeah.
I was on first string on basketball until they built the first gymnasium in Anacoco. And but I held up the standard because I only played in a T-shirt and khakis.
Okay.
And
you were tough.
But I was still there. I mean,
building the net for yourself.
What happened on that though was when they opened the gym at Anacoco. This is a fact. When they opened the gym, I was so scared, knew I shouldn't be there, and all the whole ball of wax. So they passed me the ball, and I was doing real good till the half, and they switched courts, into the courts on me. Well, I didn't pay any attention. So when the tip-off on the second half, I got the ball and run to the wrong end of the court and shot it.
And you never forget it, right?
Most embarrassing moment. Here's what happened.
No. That doesn't make you a hero.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make me a hero, but here's what happened. Right after then, I passed by and told the coach, take me out, take me out, take me out. He said, no, I'm going to leave you in. So I said, the way to get out is just shoot every shot you get. So they fed me 3 shots, and now they call them three-pointers. But I hit every one of them. 3 straight. Little old guy back over the corner. So he said, okay, it's time to come out. I didn't even stop. I went by the dressing room, picked up my clothes, went to pick up and got home. Never played ball with him anymore. I've really held up the standard.
You knew you were in the wrong place.
Wrong place.